takes time and
Well,
energy. And
it's just SEO in general. Like, what do you mean I have to do the work? Like,
yeah,
I want to mash a button and just get results.
I found this software. It says I could get results in less than 30 days. so you guys are
Uh,
doing it all wrong. You just need to log into your Fiverr account and then you rank. That's the way it's done. It's in my new
Hello,
course.
everyone. Thank you for joining us again for another episode of SEO Fight Club. And just saying hello in YouTube so you know we're here. Today, we are doing a talk on field observations in Google. And the reason I'm doing this today is because our SEO testing is having a hard time indexing right now. And it looks like if you have a lot of JavaScript frameworks and things like that where your content is dynamically loaded, you're probably having a hard time with indexing right now too. And so we're trying this new thing with our secret SEO testing group over at internetmarketing.gold, where if you can't submit tests for the contests, then we're going to try out, let's have everybody submit field observations instead, so we have more test fuel down the road, ideas for testing more observations. And so it's a new thing that we're trying out as a group. And so I wanted to do an episode on field observations to give the testers ideas for types of things they can look at and look for. So it's just really meant to be inspiration for SEO testers to go and hunt down things we may not have seen before. So with that, we'll get into it. So Clint, what happened on SEO this week?
Went over some news stories and looked at some, just kind of general stuff and the topics that go along with them, and answered some viewer questions. It was like pretty good show. In the general, though, no specific topic really.
Awesome. Do you have any big events in the future for upcoming episodes?
I do not right now. Honestly, putting this show together, it's kind of a pain figuring out topics and where you're going to go next, and that's kind of where I'm at. I'm topic dry.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the way it is with YouTube shows. I typically have like 1 in 4 planned out in advance, and then the other 3 I'm scrambling for.
Yep.
And the main reason is YouTube shows, specifically SEO YouTube shows, don't really pay the bills directly. They might indirectly, but they don't directly pay any bills. So it's really hard to spend, a ton of time on them, which is why my production quality is pretty low. You're doing better. Dre DeVera does awesome.
Yeah, he's killing everybody.
Yeah. So that's, and that segues there. If you want to see Clint's show, just go to YouTube, search for SEO this week in YouTube search, and it'll be the first result. Same thing for Dre DeVera's show. Just search for the SEO video show. He does an interview show with all the biggest personalities in SEO, so it's pretty amazing. His production quality is really up there, so if you hate the sound of my voice, check out Dre's show. That's what you're looking for. So IMG. So let's start with number 2 here. Kyle, your on-page course. Tell us about that.
the sexiest on-page course in SEO, and I say that with no problem at all. I'm confident that it is the sexiest. Is it the best? Who knows? But the sexiest for sure. Um, this is an update to the course that was released in IMG at the end of 2019. I think I've got 23 new lessons. my goal wasn't to create a brand new course, but to create a course that or to kind of, this is how I progressed. This is how I think about things, and some slight changes here and there, but overall the core is the same. There's that aspect to it, and then I'm also releasing beginning SEO, beginner SEO, and the idea of it's kind of like a primer to on page, like to get people up to speed, and not just on page, but SEO in general. But I also was thinking about you might be at the point of your SEO career where you have to teach SEO to clients. You may get to the point where you're the SEO team at the company that you're working with is on board, but they need to explain this to the dev team or the C-level team, just as to like what we're trying to accomplish or why we're trying to accomplish this. And this is actually a pretty decent framework. So people who are not beginners actually might like this course, so they can actually create a framework so they themselves can teach SEO. This particular, the way this is formatted, I've actually given this in several for several clients, given this type of a talk to not the SEOs in the team that need to understand SEO. And so that could be useful there as well. One other thing too is I've also updated the in White Hat SEO, the course from this year, where we're at. And it's actually a lot of fun. There's been a lot of growth just using basically just posting content. So starting from absolute zero and just posting content within a framework, within a White Hat framework, and then watching those results go. That was also posted this week and went live yesterday.
So
that's also up there in IMG as well.
So if I can interrupt, you expect everyone to just believe that the people that are out there doing SEO testing are then going to update their online courses for new information? Is that what you're trying to tell us?
That's right. Yeah, that's the whole thing here. I am not the same person that I was in 2019.
Nice.
I have grown. I promise. But that's actually really what the course is kind of more of my growth. What I've learned, some things that I've tweaked a little bit, and some. But the thing is, I didn't want to go out and create a new course because I haven't had a massive departure in my thought process, or in my SEO. But there have been, I think, what I would consider improvements, and basically, that's what's put into the course.
Well, I think it's awesome that you went through all the trouble to update your courses. And, that's what IMG is all about is, doing the testing, learning new information, and then updating what we share with the public. And
I'm sorry, the parts that I actually like the most are that each module I've started with some of my greatest hits on my talks in the opening stories. So I've added kind of like an opening story to each of the module on the ones through the talks throughout the years that people like the most. I think that actually might be the biggest improvement to the course.
Well, if you've never seen Kyle present live, you've missed out on something special. So if that's in the course, I think that's awesome because you have had the best presentations in SEO for, a couple years. And there are people who probably weren't able to see those. So if you got those presentations, or at least the essence of them in there, I think that's awesome. Because so many courses are all about how you're doing SEO, but your stories, the anecdotes, the history that you present in your conference talks, those things are all about the why. And it's so important to understand that, like, why bother, why go through this effort, why does it matter, what's the big picture that we're actually aiming for. And so I think it's great that you added all of that.
It's a lot of fun. That was actually the most fun to do.
And so if you're interested in learning more about Kyle's courses, just go to internetmarketing.gold. Next Tuesday, there's an AMA with me. It's under the events section. And let's see, we got episode 4 of the IMG conversion makeover. So we're like revamping our marketing on the Internet Marketing Gold website. And that's something that you can follow along. We're explaining the process and going through our thinking, how it's mechanically done. And so we're taking the stuff that we even do, within the community, and we're making that totally transparent so you can see and follow along and do similar stuff and learn from it. So that's happening too.
I think what was great is our shopping cart was converting around 5%. I think we made some changes in it, and it went to a crushing 2%. And then some more changes were done, and now it's up to like 9 or 10%. And that's been what's been a lot of fun about that series, is kind of showing like, okay, this is what we did, and this is actually what's happened.
Well, and that's an important lesson. You need a safe place to fail. And from those fails, that's when you really rise above and find your big successes. If you never have a safe place to fail, you never have the room to succeed.
It's also quick learning too. We did this, we did terrible, and don't do that on your site. And then we did this, and this is very good. Like, okay, this might be an opportunity to do something to your site.
Yeah, and that's why I say you need a safe place to fail. So
watch us
that's
fail.
The key.
Watch us fail, and then you can win.
Yep. So field observations. So we're just gonna dive right in. So the first thing I did was I went to Google and I said, let's see if BERT is still there. And so BERT is Google's natural language technology for answering questions. So if you ask a long form question, Google can figure out, based on the criteria of the question, what the answer is from documents. And then it can rank documents that have that answer higher. So what you're seeing here is I searched for what are the animals at the top of the food chain called, which is one we search a lot. It's the one that was in the initial press release from Google about BERT. It was the example of look at what it can do. And so in the past, in the featured snippet, it would highlight apex predators among the other matches. And so that was always cool, but it was always limited to the featured snippet. And so we think that the passage indexing was, at least partially about applying BERT to all the results in the primary index. So now we can see that alpha predator is highlighted in the organic web results as well. And so we normally consider the words that Google makes bold, the variations. They're often synonyms and different conjugations and singular and plural form and things like that. This would be an AI variation where, based on these words, Google knew that alpha predator or apex predator is the answer, and that becomes one of the bolded variations. But it's important to note that still the partial matches and exact matches of the question are still valid hits. And most pages will rank without the AI answer, without the answer being in the text. And so that's really important because it explains that, yes, having the answer to a question on your page can be beneficial, but it's not the only way to rank. The old way still works. And this is why things like the rhinoplasty plano methodology still works. So what do you think about that, Kyle? You still with us, Kyle?
I'm still here. I'm still here.
Okay.
Um,
So what do you think about the fact that, you know, BERT's working on all the results, but most of the websites don't need BERT to rank?
you know, when I gave a talk about how you just need to really not that much changes in SEO at this one time. And then the very first question was, well, the person before you said that BERT changed everything. Does that change everything? And I was like, did you see my talk? Like, the one that I just gave, and I think by and large most things do not change. I think it's easy to overthink a lot of things in SEO, and if you um, stick with what works, stick with the basics of it, you're going to be very successful, and then kind of add from there. Is always how I kind of look at any kind of new technique or new this, that, fancy, whatever. But if you hit the basics, if you were to put your target keyword in your URL, your meta title, your H1, and one or two times in the body, you probably have done most of SEO right then and there. And I really don't stress about any kind of update or anything beyond that if you're sticking to kind of those basics and then building on top of them.
Yep. And with this specific example, the top ranking results were still the same. It's just that, the passage that was in the search result and which keywords were highlighted, that was the part that changed for this example. But, it is a clue that, if you want to tune your page for BERT, how do you do it? Well, you kind of give, the formatted answer on your page. So you'd have the question, the exact match question. What are the animals at the top of the food chain called? You put that onto your page. And then right after it, you give the natural language answer to that exact question. You would say, the animals at the top of the food chain are called apex predators. And by doing it that way, you're basically giving the algorithm, the BERT algorithm, the syntax and the information it needs to choose you. And if you really wanted to aggressively tune for that question, you would repeat the answer 5 different ways. And so let BERT pick the best one of, 5 versions of the answer. The other thing we've done in the past is we've really tried to test, what are the limits of BERT. And so this is an example that in the past really showed the limits of what Google could do to answer questions. We'd say, what are some tips for boxing matches for shipping? So we're talking about putting matches, sticks that cause fire into boxes so that we can ship them somewhere. And we wanted some tips about how to do that because they're flammable. So in the past, Google couldn't handle this at all. They couldn't make sense of it. They would ignore parts of the query and they'd tell you how to punch people in the face. Now we actually get some results that are about shipping. They're not perfect and they still have boxing matches in there, but at least there's some things that are shipping related. And so it looks like improvement to me. What do you think, Lee? Does this look like improvement?
Yeah, I think the last time the best that we could do is get one match on the entire page that had something to do with shipping and everything else had to do with the sport of boxing. So seeing 2 in the top, 4, I'm like, wow, things are getting better. But you can still see it's almost like a disambiguation page where we're not 100% sure what kind of boxing matches you're talking about. So we'll show you a little of both.
Yeah. And so to me, it looks like that BERT no longer ignores the 4 shipping criteria, where before it just flat out ignored it. So right now it looks like, it's sometimes ignoring matches, like it's only doing matches for boxing, but not matches the sticks that cause fire.
What do you make of it highlighting like it's got some and the jab, the hook, the uppercut? What do you make of it? Why would it be highlighting those?
That's really awkward. I don't know. That that's a fluke that's currently live in Google, and I would guess that probably won't last. If that's happening a lot, that will probably get fixed, because Google saying, "Look how relevant our search results are. We found the word the." That's not going to send the right message. They're
Yeah.
bolding those words to show you how relevant the results are. And so that's a misfire. I would guess that Google would aim to fix that in a hurry.
So
And
you don't think that we should stuff the word the and some onto our pages to rank better?
No.
And on the topic of Smith, when they put BERT in, they announced it. And then when they got the patent for Smith, they were mindful to point out that Smith's not integrated into the algorithm. So do you think they've actually done it? Or do you think they just got the patents
Well,
and thinking about doing it?
that's a good question. My limited understanding of Smith is that it can handle more criteria in your questions that you ask. So BERT was kind of like, what is the top speed of a chicken? And, that was it. You couldn't have any more criteria. You couldn't say, what is the top speed of a flying chicken with, 2-pound ankle weights? You had too many criteria. BERT couldn't do it. And so the thing about Smith is that it's supposed to be able to handle a lot more criteria in your questions to handle those longer, more specific questions. This is handling more criteria. It could be Smith. I don't know. It could just be better tuned BERT. So I really couldn't tell you one way or the other. It kind of hints at what Smith is supposed to be capable of doing, but I would expect it to still be even better if it was a revolution in technology. So, but technically, I don't know. So another keyword I go to a lot is games, because for some reason, if you're a website that ranks for this keyword, you can get away with a lot of shenanigans. For some reason, you just get to get away with shit for this keyword. And so what's been crazy is that for the past 18 months, addictinggames.com has just been pegged at the top. And so when you look at their title and description, games, free online games at addicting games, and they have games, partial match domain, and their description, games, 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 games. And then they get their breadcrumbs down here, strategy games, funny games, all games, etc. You kind of get the picture, of how they got to, be there, or at least part of the formula of how they got to be there. And now we have games, PBS Kids. Boom. Well done. That's awesome. So what's going on here? This is a brand new change. This is something new that's happening at Google. So I look at that and I say, wow, there's something to investigate here.
You think there's going to be a CTR? Because there's more kids at home now and there's more older folks at home now. And they're less likely to go to a site where they got to pay for games, and they can go to like PBS because mom and dad are watching, and the AARP one because I associate myself with them.
It's plausible, but I don't have data to follow that theory. But what I can do is, kind of look at the on page and see if anything has changed with the on page. And the first thing I noticed is that PBS Kids, they got aggressive. They out keyword stuffed them because these guys used to take the lead, and PBS Kids did their number plus 100. So kudos to them on that. And then on top of that, what totally blew my mind was what they did with invisible span tags. It's interesting because it's not keyword stuffing, but they're isolating exact matches with a clever trick. And I never thought about doing that, and it's actually brilliant. And so here's like a part where they have some navigation with links, and they have emotional growth games, and they have numbers games, and they have dogs games and adventure games. And all they did was they put a you know a span tag around the word games. They broke it up with HTML to isolate it as an exact match all by itself. Now, does that help them rank better? I don't know, but I do know that recently numerous people have said that exact matches are relatively stronger as of late. And if exact matches are relatively stronger, then this might be effective. Like, we need to test that more. That might actually do some work.
And you're saying that those are invisible?
Yeah, you see no difference. You would have to style them to look different, and these have no class name. They have no inline styles. That's an invisible treatment. But it has the effect of breaking apart games, our target keyword, as an isolated exact match in the source. And so our exact match count as a result of this is higher. And that's not something that Addicting Games is doing, and Addicting Games fell 2 spots. So do I know conclusively that's what's happening? No, but we're doing field observations. We're hunting for things we can test. We're looking for things that we haven't seen before. We're looking for changes that we should investigate. And so we're on an expedition, and this is an interesting find. And that's why we love field observations. We think that they're a valid part of testing. They're kind of where you start. What should I test? Well, let's look at what Google's doing and see if we can spot something that's interesting. And this one was interesting to me. What do you think of this, Lee?
I am just thinking about a lot of different potential uses for this, or at least tests for this. One of the things I was thinking about on the previous slide before you dove into the sort of what's going on underneath the page is, did you happen to run your tool that looks at the volatility ranking by position, running it 20 times in a minute to see if Addicting Games is solidly in number 3 or whether there's volatility in the top 3?
I have not. And that would be a good thing to check on.
Cool. But yeah, this is now something I'm thinking about, and I'll bet you if Carolyn wasn't muted, you could probably hear her fingers implementing this in a test right now.
Yeah. She was one of the people that observed that exact matches were stronger as of late. And so I know that there are numerous people that that pointed that out. And so if that's true, this might do something. And so I think it's worthy of further testing.
So what, in your opinion, is the advantage of just sticking a single word in a span?
Well, our keyword is game or
Mhm.
games. And here it is isolated. It's not part of a word. It's not you're playing emotional games with me. It's games separated by HTML. It's an exact match. You'd have a hard time lumping it with the greater category because they did that treatment.
Mm-hmm.
So the categories are on there, but they broke them up for what looks like exact match context. And they did it in a way that's invisible to their visitors, but would probably be visible to Google if Google is responding to exact matches like this.
How are they? Is that whole? Because I see some of the lists are set to display, and they're using lists for those tabs on the screen, right? But I don't see where they're making it so this list isn't visible. Is it that it's not the class? It's not. It says LI class. Is it that word invisible? It's making it invisible, or is there?
Yeah. So this is some sort of
somewhere else
dynamic system. So there's a hover menu or something.
hidden somewhere? Okay.
Yeah. So this is part of when we did our cloaking episode, and people said, "Oh no, there's no reason any website should ever do cloaking." Well, yeah, this is a legitimate white hat reason why websites cloak content. And you can go into any online retailer on earth and find examples of them hiding text with this exact cloaking method, the CSS hidden. And so that's all that is it's some sort of dynamic navigation.
I wonder if this works. Would it be good for local competing with Home Advisor or Yelp, where they got all those listings in there? And it triggers Cora to say more links in Ahref, more links, more keyword and span, that kind of stuff. More in the list.
Yep, I mean there's definitely a possibility there. The problem with the Cora approach and a tactic like this is that this tactic probably isn't trending. There's probably not enough people doing it to say the more you do this tactic, the better you tend to rank. This is so specific to number one, and nobody else is probably doing it. It would be hard to get a correlation.
Right, but when you run a Cora against like a Yelp, for example, if a Yelp's in there or UpCity, any directory really, it throws you that crazy number. Put your exact match or variations inside of 300 Ahrefs, and you're like, what? I don't want that many links on my page.
Yeah, but how many people are out there doing exact match span tags though? That's the problem. So I don't even think Yelp is doing that.
No, they got
so
variations and partials.
So the interesting observation here was that PBS Kids got aggressive. Their SEO got a burr in their butt, and they decided to out-tune addicting games. So we can see some intent in their SEO. And then there's a tactic here, and I just think that's awesome. If you are an executive at PBS Kids and like you hired the SEO who did this, you should give them a raise. You should give them a bottle of champagne because they got you to number one. They beat an incumbent who had been there for a long time. And this is really clever. That SEO is thinking outside the box. So, give that SEO a raise. He got you there. Give him a bonus or something. DUI lawyer Los Angeles. So we talked about Google Screened in the past. And man, if you are a lawyer in a locality, this has got to be the most effective ad spend, I'd imagine. What's amazing to me is how few lawyers are doing this. And so this looks like the the easy road to the high CRO, ad space, because it's totally sponsored. And they're going to do this for plumbers and appliance repair and massage therapists and, just everything, dentists. And it costs money, but it isn't web search. It goes to my other episode that Google doesn't do web search anymore. This is not web search, but it's going that way, and so we're seeing more of it. But when we do get to the organic web results, we got Yelp here, then we got an actual law firm, another law firm, then we have Find Law, so another directory content site. It's interesting. It's also interesting, how little kind of shows up in the variations that are made bold. So even on this Yelp one, like it has attorney once, and that's the snippet. And it's ranking number 1. Yelp has got a lot of authority, but if you're showing off how relevant the content is, this summary text right here doesn't do it. And another observation I notice is that Hard11, who sometimes ranks number 1 for this keyword, they don't have a lot of on-page tuning, so they have a pretty heavy off-page game in play. So off-page can matter in certain niches. And we've also noticed that getting your rating stars is kind of harder to do as of late. So number of people complaining that they lost their star treatment. So we're seeing less of that in the results. So Clint, have you had any issues with star ratings as of late?
I see most of the people that are complaining about that are still complaining because they're not shown on the homepage, and that's been that way for quite some time. And it's kind of like, if the more basic your schema is, the better those actually show up. So if you're mixing in with the schema like I do, more than likely Google won't show them for whatever reason.
Yeah, so maybe simplify your schema and make sure that your WordPress plugin is doing it properly. I was looking into schema in the top 100 results. I'm creating a new schema report within Cora. And what I was seeing right off the bat is about 40% of websites have terrible mistakes in their schema. So it's very common that schema is done improperly. So here we're doing a longer tail ecom keyword. So sterling silver amethyst bracelet. When I was in ecom, I used to rank number 1 for this. And now it's all ads. So ads, this is the Google Merchant Center. And then below it is AdWords, ad. And that was everything. You have to go below the fold to get anything organic. So this is effectively ad search. When you go below the fold, Amazon, Overstock, eBay, Etsy, Kohl's. So big boxes all at the top. And it's interesting to see that the smaller brands. So up here at the top, we have the titans of industry, the page rank 9 and 10s. That's what we're seeing here. Etsy's not in that club, so they're a little guy compared to those titans. Kohl's same thing, even though it's a big store, they're not a 9 or 10 in that page rank scale. But Etsy is being competitive, and they're doing it with an old school SEO trick. They're getting exact match in the URL, they're getting exact match in the title, they've got exact match in their heading, and they've got exact match in their content. And all that agreement has this gestalt effect where the outcome is, much bigger than the sum of each individual component. And so we've known for a long time that in those hot zones, if you get keyword agreement in there, that it's a powerful thing. It looks like Etsy is leveraging that, and that still works. So if you wanted to compete on this game, those old school on-page SEO tactics look like they're still in play. Um, so, what do you think about that one, Clint?
I never really noticed the difference because that was by default how I've always done it. I've never changed from having exact match in my URL. So
yeah, the reason I notice it is that I see that these higher page rank titans of industry, they don't have to try that hard. They've got more authority to spend, so they can get away with partial matches and breaking it up. But Etsy here, the little engine that could, they figured out how to step on the gas. And so they're trying harder and they're doing the right thing. That's my observation. It seems like Etsy wants it more. They just don't have the off page to get there. So Seattle Plumber, this I love seeing because, here's one of those directories and here's a local plumber, boom. So if you don't think it can be done, well, how come people are doing it? You can beat Yelp. Now they spend a lot on marketing. You can't beat Yelp by spending nothing on marketing. But these guys, they have ads, they run ads, they have billboards, they do TV commercials, they're out, they have social media, they're out there doing marketing. And they beat Yelp. So if you have the right team of marketers and everything's firing, it can be done. So I love seeing that, and that happens right now in Google. So yes, it's possible for a smaller business to beat a bigger website. This is always interesting to me that Google would pick a snippet with the phone number that has some possibilities for lead gen. So the fact that this is allowable and possible is very interesting to me. I don't think it's ranking because of that, but I think about the ways that that could be leveraged. So that's an interesting standout. These look like entities. So it's interesting to me that this was the snippet that was chosen by Google and it's entity heavy. That's something I might want to test. I went and looked at Beacon's website for what they're doing, and they have the plumbing keyword in there 515 times. That's quite a bit. I just hear it time and time again from white hat SEOs. Keyword stuffing doesn't work. I don't want to put an unnatural amount on my page. Well, they're doing it 515 times. When we look at number 20 for the same keyword, they do it 162 times. They're number 20. They did it 162 times. And we see this time and time again. When we isolate for keyword density and testing, Google literally sorts the pages by keyword density descending. You know, when that's the only factor in play, that's how Google sorts the pages. And we see it in the wild. You know, it's a bit more noisy because there are more factors in play, but it's still a potent factor. So if you're a plumber saying, I'm going to use my keyword a natural number of times for the visible text, let's call that 40. Where should you fall compared to number 20 at 162 and number 1 at 515? Does your 40 uses of the keyword stand a chance? You know, it might if you have enough off page and other factors. But, you know, it's always there. And, you know, so many SEOs say, no, it doesn't work that way. But if you put your disbelief aside and test it, it's very clear that it works that way. Lee, what do you think about that?
I always love keyword density. It's one of the first factors that I look at, when I'm seeing a page is not pulling its weight. It's like, do we have the term on, on the page, or, in some of the sneaky spots under the page enough times to be competitive. But I think the sort of bracketing, if you're looking at the top 10, I always look at the top 10 and say, what's the minimum number of times the terms are used on a page? And if the lowest amount, 73, I'm like, all right, I got to get it on there at least 73 times to compete. Just as a simple rule. I mean, there's more to it than that, but, as a baseline, looking at it and saying the old rule, you don't want to get it more than 2% on your page, that's ridiculous. Because, if you got 1,000-word article and you're only going to put it on there 20 times, you're going to be on page 3 or 4.
Yep. And when somebody comes to you and they say, hey, we're on page 3 or 4, what do you generally assume about their density?
I assume that they've got typically low word count, low density, and generally a backlink problem as well. I mean, when you're down that far, I asked Kyle one time when he first put out his on-page course. I said, if you do the basic optimizations, you put the right words in the right zones, where do you start out, with a fresh website? And he goes, generally on page 2, except for really competitive terms where it might be, page 3 or 4. So if you got just some basic on-page tuning down, you should be, in the mix. So if somebody that's in their 30s and 40s, they've got flaws, they've got defects, generally is what I find.
Yep. I usually find that they're, undertuned in a lot of areas.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all I had on observations. I did note one comment there. So Thane was saying that one observation he told to you, Lee, was that EDU sites were ranking for Rolex, probably hacked sites. Not always. There are aggressive SEOs who happen to be in college who have access to those websites, which would be a policy violation, not a crime. So it could just be a policy violation, but again, it could be a crime. It could be hacked websites too. But yeah, the rhinoplasty plano still works. Keyword density still works. You don't have to have a BERT optimized web page to rank a page. All those things are still true. And this is what I was talking about. If you're in the internetmarketing.gold testing group, these are field observations. And I don't go out there with something specific in mind. I often go to keywords I know well because it's easier for me to identify what's different, what's out of place. And then I just start poking around. So if I see somebody new at the top, I just wonder, how might they have gotten there? Can I look around and see what they're doing that might have gotten them to that position? Or if somebody fell, I'd go and take a look and say, are they doing something we know they shouldn't? Or, I just, kind of see, what stands out and what kind of speaks to me. And if I was SEOing that website, I'd say, well, why would I do that? Why would I put the word games and invisible span tags? Why did they do that work? What do they know that I don't know? And, that's a weird one because there's no engineering reason why you would put the word games and span tags. That was totally for algorithms. And so stuff like that tends to stand out to me. And so field observations, I think it's the gateway drug to testing.
Mhm.
You get into field observations and it leads to running tests. So if you don't feel that you're technical enough to do SEO testing, well, you're probably technical enough to just go look for stuff like this. And I think everyone should be doing that. No matter what group you're in, if you're doing SEO, you ought to be looking for what's different.
Is Kyle, are you still here?
I am here.
All right, so I know that you have done the rhinoplasty plano site in a number of different cities. Do you have an idea of how many of those active rhinoplasty sites that you have that are ranking well?
I only checked 2 just to see, and they're still number 1,
Okay,
both sites.
all right. I
No,
figured,
no. And actually, I looked up because I did this about 2 months ago. They're all still ranking. They're all on. I think there was only one that wasn't on page 1, and then 2 of them are still in the number 1 spot.
it'd be interesting. I need a Kyle index. Kyle has 27 sites and 18 are ranking on page 1. I need data.
Yeah, the other thing though, I was checking it just because I'm still doing it. I've got other pages that I just don't share publicly that are on page 1 or doing quite well that are in lorem ipsum. Just to does this still work? And then let's just run up the flagpole and see what happens, and it still goes.
Yeah, and we had a test within our community where we wanted to see how many words a single page could be indexed for. And so we made, 1 million imaginary words, and the page got indexed for 180,000 of them. So it's not even just the lorem ipsum Latin uh, that you are able to rank. It's pretty much any words, no matter how randomly created. And so when people say that, oh, Google is analyzing your quality, maybe for a little bit of bonus score, like that BERT bonus, if you happen to contain the answer to a question and your page is relevant for the question, then yeah, that probably gives you a little bit of extra score, but it's probably not mandatory that you have that NLP part of the scoring system. You can totally do it without it still. And if you're not familiar with Kyle's work, he's famous for entering into an SEO contest who can rank the best. And while he didn't win within the time frame, a week or two later, he swept the floor with everyone. And he did it with Latin, and he did it by doing SEO paint by numbers using Page Optimizer Pro and Cora, and his experience and his testing. And he's got articles, and your course actually goes over a lot of what you did in that, right?
Well, the course, like, the point of the whole exercise was to show that, conversion and ranking are two different things. That you need great copy in order to convert and to keep people on your site and get them engaged with what you're doing, but that isn't what ranking is all about. And it still continues to be true to this day that ranking is not just write the best copy and you'll rank. That's not how it works at all. It's quite math based, and Pop and Cora point that out, I think, repeatedly. And I'm sure people do great with however they want to do their SEO, but I think you're shooting yourself in the foot if you're not taking advantage of these types of opportunities where you can see, how many times you need to put something in a particular place and then just do it, and you'll do pretty well.
Yeah, and I find that I try to segment boundaries. Like when I'm working with a client, I'll often say that, the top navigation is for humans. So let's keep the SEO out of there. That's all for conversion. That's to make humans more likely to add something to cart and check out and to find what they want. Now the footer navigation, that's for algorithms. So I set up firewalls on where to conduct SEO, and a lot of my success when I was in online retail was doing exact match footer links. I did that for 17 years, and it always worked, and a lot of that stuff still ranks fabulously. Um, and it's just amazing, what the algorithm wants versus what people want versus what white hat SEOs believe. Those are three totally different things.
Well, that was actually one of the reasons that I did the white hat SEO course, was just to show that, like, while maybe doing a site in lorem ipsum now might violate Google's guidelines, it didn't at the time. But you can still do these things, and be a white hat. I consider myself a white hat SEO. I stay within Google's guidelines. But just because I run test sites doesn't mean the stuff that I'm doing for clients isn't within the guidelines at all. The one I This is something, it took me a while to figure this out. Because sites like WordPress or any kind of other CMS, when you build your page, they automatically build your navigation menu. And a lot of people think that pages and navigation menu are linked together, that they're the same thing. And the navigation at the top is a fiction. You can make that navigation whatever it needs to be, and you can make your pages or your site structure whatever they need to be, and you can separate the two. And it took me a long time to realize that people don't realize that. That the navigation at the top, yeah, you should make that as easy as it possibly can be for humans to get through your site, but it doesn't have to be related to anything on how you've built your site architecture that would be better for what Google wants. And that's an opportunity to give humans what they need so they can get where they need to go, and then a site structure that Google needs so it can get where it needs to go. You can separate those two completely. And I wasn't quite grasping why people didn't understand that concept. It's just because CMSs natively build out your navigation based on how you're building out your pages. They do it for you, and then people see them as tied together when they're absolutely not.
Yeah, I mean, they're completely arbitrary. So your top navigation can just simply be site wide to your 5 most important pages, but your website overall might have 4,000 pages. Doesn't mean they all need to be in the top menu. They can be, but they don't have to be. It's arbitrary for sure. So with that, we're at an hour, so we'll go ahead and stop it here. I want to thank everyone for joining us again, and we'll be back next week with another exciting topic.